California, 1965. Close your eyes for a moment and think about that. Not the California that exists today, the one before, the one that felt like it could last forever. Somewhere in Southern California right now, a family is pulling out of a driveway where an orange grove used to breathe. Somewhere in Santa Monica, a luxury apartment tower casts its shadow over the exact spot where children once screamed with joy as gondolas floated 75 feet above the Pacific Ocean. And somewhere in Los Angeles, a freeway overpass carries 100,000 cars a day over the ghost of a rail line that, once upon a time, connected every corner of this state. You can't see any of it, but it was there. All of it. It was there. This is a video about 13 things, real, specific, documented things that existed in 1960s California and are gone today. Not faded, not diminished, gone. Some of them vanished slowly, quietly, while everyone was looking elsewhere. Some were taken in the middle of the night, and some were dismantled by a single decision made by someone in a room most of us never heard of. If you were there, you'll remember. If you weren't, you'll feel the weight of what was lost before you were old enough to know it existed. Here are 13 things from 1960s California that no longer exist. The Pacific Electric Red Cars. In 1960, California had something almost no one in the world had built at that scale, a network of electric railways stretching over 1,000 miles across Southern California, connecting every city from San Bernardino to Santa Monica, from Long Beach to the San Fernando Valley. They called them the Red Cars. They were dark crimson and orange, and they moved through the morning air with a low electric hum and a bell that rang twice at every crossing. At their peak, there were 2,160 of them running every single day, more route miles than any electric railway system on Earth. You could ride from Pasadena to the beach for a few cents. You could take your children from Glendale to the movies in Hollywood without starting a car. The whole region was stitched together, not by concrete and exhaust, but by copper wire and the quiet hum of electricity. On April 9, 1961, a Tuesday morning, the last Pacific Electric Red Car made its final run from downtown Los Angeles to Long Beach. 60 years of daily service ended at a platform with almost no ceremony. The motorman stepped off, the doors closed, and Southern California was handed the freeway. There are people who still remember the sound of that bell. If you're one of them, you know exactly what we mean. Pacific Ocean Park. If you grew up in Los Angeles in the early 1960s, there was a place at the edge of the ocean between Santa Monica and Venice that felt like the future had arrived early just for California. It was called Pacific Ocean Park. 28 acres built on a pier jutting into the Pacific, designed by Hollywood set artists and special effects engineers. Gondolas shaped like glass bubbles floated 75 feet above the water in a half-mile loop over the open ocean. There was a ride called Flight to Mars, a tiki train that took you through a simulated erupting volcano, a roller coaster that still had the salt wind in its rails from the pier it had replaced. On its opening weekend in July 1958, Pacific Ocean Park drew more visitors than Disneyland. They stood in lines that stretched down the pier into the afternoon sun. Then, a decision. In 1965, the city of Santa Monica began an urban renewal project. Streets leading to the park were closed. Construction fences blocked the approach roads. The families stopped coming, not because they didn't want to, but because they couldn't get there. By 1967, the park was bankrupt. By 1975, it was ash. Fires consumed what decay had started. The city tore down what the fire left behind, and today, nothing. A bike path runs over the footprint where children once floated above the Pacific Ocean in glass bubbles. And from the ruins, literally from the rotting pier that remained after the park closed, a group of teenagers called the Z-Boys taught themselves to skateboard. The aggressive, dangerous style they developed in those ruins became the foundation of modern skateboarding. Something new was born entirely from what had been lost.
The orange groves of the San Fernando Valley. Before the valley was freeways and strip malls and housing tracts running to the horizon, before all of that, it was something that most people under 50 have never seen and can barely imagine. It was orange groves, miles of them. The scent in spring, orange blossom, would drift across entire neighborhoods in a sweet fog that California writers described as the smell of promise. You could stand on a hill above Canoga Park or Northridge in 1961 and see nothing in every direction but rows of citrus trees shimmering green and gold in the valley light. The decision to convert the orchards was made not once, but 10,000 times, parcel by parcel, grove by grove, each one sold to a developer who could turn citrus into subdivision faster than any farmer could turn it into profit. By 1975, the valley that had once perfumed all of Los Angeles was gone, asphalt where the blossoms had been. One grove remains, 400 trees on the campus of Cal State Northridge, protected since 1972 by students who understood, even then, that they were protecting a memory as much as a place. The full-service gas station. You pulled in and a bell rang, not inside your car, at the station. A black rubber hose stretched across the forecourt, tripped under your tire, and somewhere inside a building, a bell rang twice, and a man in a uniform came out to meet you. He wore his name on his chest, his company logo on the other pocket. He filled your tank. He checked your oil, pulled the dipstick, wiped it clean on a rag, checked it, and replaced it without you asking. He washed your windshield front and back with a squeegee and a bucket of clean water. He checked your tire pressure. He gave you a road map for free if you needed one, and he marked it with a pen to show you exactly where to turn. California had over 32,000 service stations in the mid-1960s. The men who worked them were not just attendants, they were mechanics who knew your car, knew your name, and remembered how you took your change. Some of them had worked the same station for 15 years. The 1973 oil crisis changed everything. Stations that had operated on small margins began pushing self-service to survive. State by state, the uniform came off. The squeegee disappeared. The name tag went with it. The man who used to come out and meet you, he's been gone for 50 years now, and nobody thought to say goodbye. The car hop. She came to you on roller skates. You pulled your car into the numbered stall under the lights and the neon, and within 2 minutes she was at your window, notepad ready, tray balanced on her forearm, smiling at you through the California evening air. You rolled your window down 2 inches, and she hooked the metal tray right there on the glass. Your food came to you. Your milkshake came to you. Your world for 20 minutes in a parking lot in Burbank or Glendale or Riverside required nothing from you but the pleasure of being in a car on a warm night in 1964 that tasted like everything was going to be fine. By the mid-1970s, she was largely gone. The drive-through window replaced her, faster, cheaper, requiring no person at all. Progress, they called it. Nobody asked the car hop what she thought.
Googie architecture, the coffee shops of the space age. Someone had decided, sometime in the late 1940s, that if you were going to build a coffee shop in California, you had to announce it. Not with a sign, with the building itself. The roof lines angled toward the sky like something trying to take off. The glass walls swept in great curves. The signs exploded in starbursts of neon, red and orange and electric blue, visible a quarter mile down the boulevard from a moving car. The whole aesthetic said, the future is here. It tastes like coffee. It costs 35 cents. This style, named after a coffee shop on Sunset Boulevard called Googie's that John Lautner designed in 1949, was California's gift to American visual culture. It was the architecture of optimism, of atomic energy and space travel, and the absolute certainty that everything was getting better. By the mid-1960s, it was already starting to feel old-fashioned. The same culture that had celebrated the starburst neon began to find it excessive. By the 1970s, developers were knocking these buildings down faster than preservationists could document them, because a Googie coffee shop on a commercial lot was worth less than whatever they could build to replace it. Most of them are gone. What remains is landmarked, protected by the belated recognition that what California tore down, it can never rebuild. The future it believed in so completely is now a memory. The drive-in movie theater. Your parents put you in the back seat in your pajamas, maybe a pillow, maybe a blanket. The windows went up and you were in a cocoon, the whole family in a metal shell under an open sky, and the screen was so big it filled your entire vision, and the speaker clipped to the half-open window crackled with a sound that was never quite right and was somehow perfect because of it. California had hundreds of drive-in theaters in the 1960s. The Van Nuys Drive-In, the Vineland, the Paramount. The one your family went to, wherever you grew up in this state, has a name that you still remember, even if the place it belonged to is now a shopping center or a storage facility or a parking lot. The drive-in was the last public space where American families chose, voluntarily, enthusiastically, to be together in a shared experience. It required nothing sophisticated. It required a car, a speaker, and a willingness to be in the same small space as people you loved, watching something enormous against the California night sky. Real estate ended most of them. By 1990, fewer than 1 in 10 remained. The land was simply worth more as something else. Marine land of the Pacific. On the Palos Verdes Peninsula, on 90 acres of clifftop land overlooking the Pacific, there was a place that opened 1 year before Disneyland and was for a moment the most ambitious oceanarium the world had ever seen. Marine Land of the Pacific opened in August 1954, and by the 1960s, it was drawing more than 1 million visitors a year. School buses lined up in the parking lot, children pressed their faces to the glass of tanks holding 1 million gallons of seawater, dolphins leaped through hoops, Orky and Corky, the park's famous killer whales, launched themselves 18 feet into the air to take fish from the teeth of their trainers. The park sat on some of the most beautiful coastal land in California, which was, eventually, its undoing. In January 1987, new corporate owners loaded Orky and Corky onto moving trucks in the middle of the night, secretly, without warning. They were driven down the interstate to SeaWorld in San Diego, while the people of the Palos Verdes Peninsula woke up to find their park, simply gone. The drains were filled with concrete so it could never reopen. The gates were locked 3 weeks ahead of schedule. The animals never came back. The buildings came down slowly over 20 years. A luxury resort called Terrania stands there now, on the same cliffs, overlooking the same ocean. If you listen carefully on certain evenings, they say, you can still smell the salt water and the fish oil that the trainers used to carry. But the whales are gone, and the children who pressed their faces to the glass are grandparents now.
The single-screen movie palace. Going to the movies in California in 1963 was not casual. You dressed. Not formally, but you dressed. Because where you were going had a lobby with a chandelier, velvet curtains from floor to ceiling, a ceiling painted with stars or clouds or golden flourishes that had been put there by craftsmen who spent 6 weeks on a scaffold making something beautiful for strangers. 1,400 seats, sometimes more. An organ that rose from the pit before the film.
the Fox Theater in Bakersfield, the Orpheum in Los Angeles, the Grand Lake in Oakland, the Castro in San Francisco. These were not places to watch movies. They were places to be reminded that you lived in a civilization that valued beauty enough to build it into the ceiling of a building where ordinary people bought a ticket and sat down. Television cut the audiences. Suburban multiplexes cut them further. By the 1980s, the single-screen palace was largely finished, too expensive to run, too large for the audiences that remained. Many were simply torn down. Some became parking garages. A few survive, protected, beloved, attended by people who understand that what they're really watching is not a film, but the last performance of an era that believed going to the movies should feel like an occasion. Free public higher education. In 1960, the state of California passed something called the Master Plan for Higher Education. It said this: every qualified California resident who wanted to attend a state university or college could do so, and tuition would be free. Not subsidized, free. The belief behind it was simple and, at the time, bipartisan. An educated population benefits everyone. The cost of education should be carried by the state, because the state benefits when its people are educated. In 1968, a California resident paid $300 a year in fees to attend UC Berkeley, the equivalent of about $2,000 today. Tuition zero. In 1966, Ronald Reagan was elected governor of California on a campaign that included, among other things, his intention to, in his words, clean up the mess at Berkeley. Within a year of taking office, he proposed charging tuition for the first time. He cut state education funding. He began the dismantling of the master plan. Today, UC Berkeley costs $15,000 a year in tuition for California residents, with total annual costs approaching $40,000. America currently carries over $1.6 trillion in student loan debt. The Richfield Oil Building. There was a building in downtown Los Angeles, at the corner of Fifth and Flower, that was considered one of the most beautiful skyscrapers in the American West, the Richfield Oil Building. Completed in 1929, black granite and gold terracotta rising 30 stories above the Los Angeles skyline. At night, it was lit from within, a dark tower with a golden glow that pilots used as a landmark over the basin for decades. In 1969, it was demolished. Not because it was structurally unsound, not because it had failed in any way, because the land beneath it was worth more to the company that owned it as a parking lot and an undeveloped parcel than as one of the most distinctive buildings on the California skyline. The demolition of the Richfield building so outraged the people of Los Angeles that it directly sparked the city's historic preservation movement. The building that replaced it is a generic office tower you would not be able to identify in a photograph if your life depended on it. What was traded for it is still debated. What was lost is not. The California Dream. What it meant to arrive. We've been through 12 specific things, 12 real, documented, named places and institutions and rituals that existed in 1960s California and are gone now. But there's a 13th, and it's harder to name because it wasn't a building you could photograph or a streetcar you could ride. It was a feeling. Through most of the 1960s, California meant something specific to Americans. It meant, you can start over here. It meant, if you get in a car and drive until the land runs out, there will be something worth finding at the end of it. Cheap enough land to build a life on, a college education you could afford on a summer job, a coast that belonged to everyone, a future that was being built in public for everyone, with the conviction that what was good for the state was good for all its people. That California, the one that greeted people at the state line with the genuine promise of a second chance,
began to leave quietly in the middle of the 1960s. Not all at once, not with an announcement, the way all the things in this video left, incrementally, invisibly, while everyone was looking somewhere else. You didn't notice the red cars were gone until you needed one. You didn't notice the orange blossom until the grove was a parking lot. You didn't notice the California that was available to everyone until it became available only to some. That's the thing about loss, isn't it? By the time you notice it, you're already remembering it.